so the proposition I'm going to be refuting against is that gay marriage would have positive consequences for the American well-being, both economically and socially. Before I begin, I would like to cover some things on the introduction of the advocate's speech. He said that he compared the LGBT community's oppression to that of the African Americans, the Jewish, and the women of our past. I believe this was an attempt to make the argument seem more important, comparing the LGBT community's oppression to the women, the African American, and the Jewish people of the past is quite extreme. Sure, it is still an oppression, but it is not genocide. It is not slavery or segregation, and it is not exclusion from participation in democracy. Now, as far as positive consequences toward the American well-being economically, while the same-sex couples would indeed receive marriage benefits that could possibly boost the economy, a article published in the Journal of Economic Perspectives displayed information in a table that was gathered and published in that article that 8.2 and 7.4% of gay and lesbian couples respectively own a house without mortgage, and 52.2% and 54.3% of gay and lesbian couples respectively own a house with mortgage. Compare that to heterosexual couples, where 13% own a house without mortgage and 62% own a house with mortgage. So if this proves that a same-sex couple is less likely to buy a house without mortgage or pay it off, which could negatively affect the economy if there are more same-sex couples out there. The main claims I'll be refuting will be more focused on the social implications of legalizing gay marriage. His three claims were same-sex marriages are dysfunctional and his three main claims socially were that the idea that same-sex marriages are dysfunctional and do not work out is false, that legalizing gay marriage will increase acceptance in our culture, and that gay marriage should be legalized because the issue has prolonged itself. For his argument that the idea that same-sex marriages are dysfunctional and do not work out is false, he said that based on the evidence that 5 out of the 10 states with the lowest divorce rates are 5 of the 8 states that allow for or recognize gay marriage, does not directly support a direct relationship between that and lower divorce rates. In fact, evidence gathered by many researchers have linked it with more of a cultural relationship between legalization of gay marriage and low divorce rates, meaning that it's a simple state of culture, not a direct relationship. Gary Gates, Williams Distinguished Scholar at the UCLA School of Law's Williams Institute, says that same-sex couples divorce at rates comparable to those of different sex couples. And in Massachusetts, the state that legalized same-sex marriage in 2004, thus having the longest record of having legalized same-sex marriage, has had the same divorce rates since 2004 before they legalized it, and in 2009. While it is still legalized, so there's no direct correlation. Against his second point, legalizing gay marriage will have, or I'm saying that legalizing gay marriage will have little to no effect on the amount of bullying or discrimination that we see in American culture. It is evident in American culture that making something legal does not have much of an effect on how the citizens view the subject. As such an example, when Prohibition came into effect, many Americans undertook bootlegging and secret clubs, showing, not publicly, but obviously displaying their displeasing and rejection of the law. It is not the law that makes something acceptable in American culture, it is the viewpoint and the mental state and culture itself that makes something acceptable. And then saying something should be legalized simply because the issue has flaw in itself is flawed logic. A decision should always be made based upon the facts, current values, and situation, not because it has simply been going on for too long. If the issue is still persisting, then that means that the opposing force is still unconvinced and is of majority, and therefore, so sorry. Therefore, it will happen and we respectful.
It's a good warning that you went overtime, that's all. Don't worry about it. All right, the secondary claims are laid out pretty well. I like the idea that you are suggesting that there's an equivocation done by the advocate, that the LGBT community is seeing themselves in a particular way, and that you're going to try and parse that by arguing that they are substantially different. It's a kind of conclusionary statement on your part. I think I understand the inference that you're making. What you need to do is then talk about why that should affect the way we judge the following issues. Does it minimize them in some way? And I think that that's not really explained very clearly. I did think that your argument on the economic issue was an interesting one, but it was a little confusing to begin with because you really start talking about the rates of home ownership, for instance, and I don't remember what the advocate's evidence on this particular point was. And unless it dealt with home ownership issues, this seems a little bit less direct. I do think it's a relevant point, but it's one of those things that you should have the claim first on instead of trying to present the evidence first. You know, the only way that I would go the other direction on it, it would be as if it's a direct response to the evidence that the advocate's presented on that particular point. The advocate appears to have been a little more structured on the second point, and they had those internal secondary or minor issues, and you respond to each of those points. I think I understand most of those arguments. I thought you did a good job on the reasoning on the divorce rate point, especially with the statistic that talks about what's going on in Massachusetts. I think that undermines the claim that the advocate was presenting there pretty well. The bullying and the legality thing, you've got the hypothetical example about prohibition. That's okay. I don't remember what the advocate's evidence was on that particular point, so contrasting it is a little bit hard to do. And on the last point, it's basically a platitude that you're presenting here. I don't remember what the advocate's point on that was. You got two platitudes that run into each other. I'm not sure why we should believe either one. I think both of them probably needed stronger arguments. All right.